Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're going deep into modern political philosophy today.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, from Hobbes all the way to Marx.
Okay.
We've got all sorts of excerpts from academic books and articles.
Wow.
All about how these thinkers saw power, freedom, and the perfect society, really.
That's a lot to cover.
Yeah, but, you're obviously interested in this stuff, so we're going to unpack all their main arguments.
Sounds good.
We're going to look at the history behind their thinking, too.
Right.
And who knows, maybe we'll even find some surprising connections along the way.
I love those aha moments.
Me too.
What's really cool is that we're not just looking at these thinkers one by one.
Right.
We're actually tracing a whole line of ideas, seeing how they built on each other's work, challenged each other,
Right.
sometimes totally disagreed.
Yeah.
It's like a conversation across centuries.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with Thomas Hobbes, a guy who, well, he had kind of a dark view of humanity.
Yeah, Hobbes, he was convinced that humans, at their core, are driven by self-preservation and this constant desire for more power.
A hunger for power, yeah.
And if we don't keep that in check,
Yeah.
he believed it leads to what he called the state of nature.
Oh, right, the state of nature.
It's a chaotic mess. Everyone's at war with each other.
Like a free-for-all.
Exactly. And honestly, reading Hobbes today,
Yeah.
in a world with so much division and unrest,
Right?
you can't help but wonder, was he onto something?
It's like he's looking at today's world and saying,
Right.
I told you so.
I told you so.
But so what was his solution? I mean, how do we get out of this mess, according to Hobbes?
Well, he was a big believer in the social contract.
Okay.
Individuals got to give up some of their freedom
Yeah.
to an absolute ruler
Whoa.
in exchange for security and order.
So it's like a trade-off.
It is. You give up some liberty to avoid chaos, to escape that constant state of conflict.
That sounds pretty extreme, though. Surrendering to an absolute ruler, I mean, didn't that cause a lot of controversy?
Oh, absolutely. Hobbes's ideas,
Yeah.
especially his defense of absolutism and censorship,
Yeah.
they were super controversial,
I bet.
even back then.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how he came to those conclusions.
How so?
Well, he was really into geometry.
Geometry.
Yeah, it's logic, it's certainty.
Okay.
He wanted to build a government as solid as a mathematical proof.
So he was kind of like creating a political algorithm.
Kind of, like a formula for social harmony.
Interesting.
He believed that a well-designed government could actually impose order on human nature's chaos.
I see. So a top-down approach.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing not everyone bought into that.
Definitely not.
Okay.
And that's where John Locke comes in,
Right. Locke.
often called the father of liberalism.
Oh, okay.
His two treatises of government paint a very different picture
Yeah.
of human nature and the government's role.
Locke was more optimistic about humanity, right?
Oh yeah, way more.
Yeah.
He believed that humans are born with these natural rights
What?
to life,
Right.
liberty, and property. And these exist even before any government.
That's a key difference from Hobbes.
Huge. For Locke, government isn't there to control us.
Yeah.
It's there to protect those rights.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, citizens can resist tyranny.
So Locke is the inspiration for all those "don't tread on me" flags we see.
He's a big part of it.
Yeah.
His ideas had a huge impact on revolutions and democratic thought in general.
Yeah, that's a powerful legacy.
It is.
But there's also that whole thing about Locke and property, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Always a hot topic.
Rightly so. Locke's ideas about property were revolutionary,
In what way?
but they also, unintentionally, laid the groundwork for some not-so-great things.
Like what?
Colonialism, for example,
Yeah.
and the dispossession of indigenous peoples.
Yeah, I can see that.
His theory basically said you could own land just by working on it, without regard for who might have lived there before.
That's a pretty convenient justification if you're trying to expand.
It is, and it shows how even the most influential thinkers can be products of their time.
Right.
Sometimes their ideas have unintended consequences.
That's a good reminder to always think critically about these ideas.
Absolutely. Don't just accept them at face value.
Okay, good advice. Now, let's move on to Jean-Jacques Rousseau.
Rousseau.
His social contract introduces this really fascinating concept of the general will.
The general will. Rousseau was wrestling with a question that's still super relevant today.
What's that?
How do we balance individual freedom with the need for a cohesive society?
That's a tough one.
It is. And his answer, the general will, represents the good of everyone.
Okay.
It's bigger than just individual self-interest.
So it's like the common good.
Yes. And by participating in self-government, individuals can align their own will with this general will.
Okay.
And that's how they achieve true freedom, according to Rousseau.
But doesn't that sound kind of paradoxical?
How so?
Well, how can giving up individual freedom lead to more freedom?
That's the heart of the tension in Rousseau's work.
Mm-hmm.
He believed that by shaping the general will, we're essentially governing ourselves,
Yeah.
which is a higher form of freedom than just chasing our own desires.
Okay, I can see that, but who decides what the general will is,
Right.
and what if people disagree?
That's where things get messy.
I bet.
Rousseau's work is full of those kinds of complexities
I can imagine.
and contradictions.
Like what?
Well, take his views on women, for example.
Oh, yeah, Rousseau and women.
That's a whole other conversation.
There it is.
He championed individual participation in shaping the general will,
Right.
but then excluded women from that process.
So freedom for some, but not for all.
Sadly, yeah, a recurring theme throughout history.
It is.
It's a reminder that even the most progressive thinkers can have blind spots.
True. Okay, now, let's talk about Baruch Spinoza.
Spinoza, fascinating guy.
Yeah, his theological political treatise offers a very unique perspective.
Very unique. He emphasized reason
Okay.
and this interconnectedness of everything.
Interesting.
He believed true freedom comes from understanding the laws of nature.
So instead of fighting the system, we should try to understand it.
And find our place within it.
That sounds a bit passive, though.
Yeah.
Where's the room for change in that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Spinoza believed in accepting the universe's order, but he also recognized human agency.
Okay.
Through reason, we can improve our conditions.
So it's not just about accepting the status quo.
Right.
It's about using reason to make things better.
Exact.
And how did Spinoza view democracy?
He had a nuanced view.
How so?
He saw its potential for empowering citizens,
Yeah.
but also warned about its instability and the tyranny of the majority.
That's an important point,
He saw democracy as a balancing act.
which we're still trying to figure out today.
For sure.
Okay, let's move on to the Age of Enlightenment and Immanuel Kant.
Kant, a giant of political thought
Yeah, he was all about reason.
and individual autonomy.
Right, as the basis of a just society.
Exactly. His work, especially Perpetual Peace and Critique of Judgment,
Yeah.
they've really shaped how we think about international relations.
And the role of morality in politics.
Absolutely.
Kant was all about universal principles, right?
He was.
Didn't he come up with the categorical imperative?
He did.
That's a big one.
It's one of the most famous
Yeah.
and challenging concepts in ethics.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's a test for whether an action is moral or not.
How does that work?
Kant said, an action is only okay if everyone can do it without causing a contradiction,
I see.
like a universal rule.
Okay, but how do we apply that in the real world?
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Kant believed reason should guide us, both individually and collectively.
So a moral compass for humanity.
Yes. And his ideas about international cooperation,
Yeah,
based on treating other states as ends in themselves,
right.
they were revolutionary back then.
I bet. But probably hard to put into practice.
They are.
Okay, let's talk about G.W.F. Hegel.
Hegel, known for his complex philosophical system.
Yeah, he had some big ideas.
For sure. He believed that the state is the highest expression of ethical life.
State.
Yeah, embodying the reason and spirit of the people.
Okay.
He also saw history as a process of progress, unfolding through conflict and resolution.
That sounds like his idea of the dialectic, right?
Exactly.
That one always makes my head spin.
I know, it's a tough one. Basically, it describes a process of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Right.
Ideas clash, and through that clash, a new understanding emerges.
So history is like a giant philosophical debate.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Hegel saw the state as the culmination of this whole process.
The highest form of ethical life.
Exactly. But he also knew that the state,
Yeah.
like all human institutions, is imperfect.
Right.
It needs to keep evolving.
But wasn't Hegel criticized for being too supportive of the status quo? Yeah, like justifying existing power structures.
It's true, as some people thought he was just defending the establishment.
Right.
But Hegel's work is more nuanced than that.
Okay.
He knew institutions had limits. They need to change with the times.
So he wasn't just a cheerleader for those in power.
Not at all.
Right.
He believed in the power of ideas to shape history,
Yeah.
but also in the importance of individual action.
And the need for constant change.
Exactly.
Okay, last stop on this philosophical journey. Karl Marx. His critique of capitalism is as relevant as ever.
It is. His work, from his early writings like economic and philosophic manuscripts
Yeah.
to his later masterpiece, Capital,
Right.
the powerful analysis of the problems with
And
capitalism.
its injustices.
Yes.
Yeah.
He believed that capitalism, while creating wealth and progress, was also inherently exploitative
Okay.
and alienating.
Marx was all about economics, wasn't he?
He was.
The idea that economic forces drive everything in society.
That's the core of his theory of historical materialism.
He argued that the economic base shapes everything else.
The superstructure, right.
Exactly. Politics, law, culture, even our ideas.
So for Marx, it all boils down to who controls the means of production.
Essentially.
Like, who owns the factories, the resources.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He believed that under capitalism, the bourgeoisie
The owners,
exploit the proletariat.
the workers.
Yes.
And this creates a class struggle
An inherent
that he believed would eventually lead to the overthrow of capitalism.
He did. He envisioned a communist society
A workers' revolution.
where alienation is overcome
Okay.
and humans can be truly free.
But history hasn't exactly gone according to Marx's plan, has it?
Not exactly, no.
Capitalism is still here.
It is, but that doesn't mean Marx's ideas are useless.
Right.
His critique of capitalism,
Yeah.
his analysis of economic power,
Mm-hmm.
and his focus on the social impact of inequality,
Right.
they all still matter, especially today.
With all the problems we see.
Exactly. Globalization, automation, the concentration of wealth.
Yeah, it's like we're living in a world where Hobbes and Marx are having this philosophical battle,
That's a great way to put it.
each offering their own vision of how society should be organized.
Competing visions.
We're still struggling with those same fundamental questions about power, freedom, and the role of government.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
We have.
From Hobbes's dark view of the state of nature to Marx's radical critique of capitalism.
Quite a journey.
But our deep dive doesn't stop there.
Oh. What else is there?
There's another fascinating theme running through all these sources.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's the concept of republicanism.
Republicanism, huh?
Yeah, and it's more complex than you might think.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in.
Me too.
As we've been talking about these different thinkers, I keep noticing this idea of a republic popping up.
Yeah, it's one of those terms you hear a lot,
Right.
but I'm not sure everyone really understands what it means.
Exactly. So, what is a republic, really?
Yeah.
And where did the idea come from?
Good question.
Well, the idea goes all the way back to ancient Rome.
Ancient Rome.
Yeah. After they got rid of their kings,
Okay.
they set up this new system,
Uh-huh.
and they called it a res publica.
Res publica.
Literally, a public thing.
Interesting.
It's a total shift away from the rule of monarchs and tyrants.
So it was about moving power away from one person.
Exactly. To a system where the people had a say.
Okay, so shared power.
Shared power, exactly. The idea that government is a public matter, not some king's private business,
Right.
that's central to the Republican ideal.
It's amazing how that idea from so long ago still matters today.
It really is.
But Rome wasn't exactly a democracy as we think of it now, right?
No, not in the modern sense.
Yeah.
The Roman Republic was this complex system.
With different parts.
Yeah, a senate, assemblies, magistrates,
Okay.
all designed to balance power,
Right.
to stop anyone from becoming too dominant.
Checks and balances.
Exactly. And that's a key part of republicanism that shows up again and again throughout history.
Makes sense. They were trying to avoid that absolute power corrupts problem.
Right? They'd seen how one ruler with too much power could lead to tyranny,
Yeah.
and they wanted to safeguard against that.
So how did this Roman model of a republic influence later thinkers?
It became like a gold standard, and ideal thinkers like Machiavelli,
Okay.
Montesquieu, even the American founding fathers,
Yeah.
they were all inspired by the Roman example
They saw it as a model for protecting liberty.
and promoting civic virtue.
Right. Okay, let's talk about Machiavelli for a second.
Okay.
He's often seen as this kind of ruthless strategist.
Yeah, a bit cynical.
But wasn't he also in favor of republics?
He was. And that's what makes Machiavelli so interesting.
How so?
He believed a republic, with its focus on citizens participating,
Yeah.
was actually the best way to avoid tyranny.
Really?
He thought it was more stable than a monarchy in the long run.
So he wasn't just about power for power's sake.
No, he saw a moral side to republics. He argued that a republic could make people want to serve the public good. That sense of shared purpose was key for a healthy society.
But didn't Machiavelli also think you sometimes need a strong leader to establish order?
He did.
Yeah.
He recognized that in times of crisis,
Yeah.
a strong, even ruthless leader
Right.
might be needed to get things back on track.
To unify things.
Exactly. But he saw that as temporary.
Okay.
A necessary evil, maybe.
To get to a more stable republic.
Precisely.
So the republic is the goal.
Yes.
But sometimes you need a strong hand to get there.
This is a recurring theme, actually.
Yeah, I can see that. Now, let's jump ahead to the American founding fathers.
Yeah.
They were big on Republican ideas, right?
Oh, huge. The American Revolution was, in many ways, a culmination of centuries of thinking about republics.
Going all the way back to Rome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The founding fathers looked to thinkers like Locke,
Right.
Montesquieu,
Yeah.
even Machiavelli, to design their new government.
So the American experiment was like a grand synthesis of Republican ideas.
You could say that, but they also had unique challenges.
Like what?
They had to adapt those old ideas to a vast new nation.
Yeah, a very different context.
Totally. And that led to some intense debates.
I bet. Where can we see those debates playing out?
The Federalist Papers,
Oh, right.
they offered a fascinating look into the arguments and compromises that shaped the American Constitution.
I've always found the Federalist Papers kind of intimidating.
I know they're dense,
Yeah.
but even dipping into a few key essays can be really insightful.
Okay, so what were some of the big debates they had
One of the main ones was about the balance of power.
between the federal government and the states?
Exactly. The Federalists,
Yeah.
they wanted a strong central government.
They thought it was necessary for the nation to stay together.
Right. They'd seen how weak the Articles of Confederation were.
Yeah.
The states had too much power then.
It didn't work out so well.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They believed a strong national government was needed to regulate the economy,
Okay.
provide for defense, and prevent factions from tearing the country apart.
But didn't their opponents, the anti-federalists, worry about tyranny?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They feared a strong central government would take away people's liberties.
That's a classic concern.
It is. It's that struggle between order and freedom playing out all over again.
On a huge scale this time.
Exactly. And that tension is built into the American political system.
Right.
The Bill of Rights, for example.
Yeah.
That was a concession to the anti-federalists.
Okay.
It tries to find that balance between individual rights and a strong government.
The Bill of Rights is such a cornerstone of America.
It is. And it came out of this debate about power.
It's fascinating how it all connects.
It is. And it reminds us that the American experiment with republicanism was just the beginning.
Right.
It's an ongoing process,
It's all evolving.
constantly negotiating between different ideas and interests.
So it's about putting those ideals into practice,
Yeah.
but also dealing with the challenges of actually making them work.
Exactly. And that's a struggle we're still having today.
We're still figuring it out.
We are. The American experiment is always changing, adapting to new things.
So republicanism isn't just some old, irrelevant idea.
Not at all. It's still shaping how we think about government and citizenship.
It's a living concept.
It is. The core principles of republicanism:
Okay, what are those again?
limited government,
Right.
civic virtue,
Okay.
citizen participation, and a focus on the common good.
Yeah,
Those are all still relevant today.
they are. Okay, so we've explored the history of republicanism from Rome to America,
Quite a journey.
but our sources also talk about another fascinating theme,
Ooh, what's that?
the concept of opinion.
Opinion. Interesting.
Yeah, and how it relates to all these ideas about power and government.
Okay, I'm curious.
And it might surprise you, but the way philosophers have thought about opinion has been really controversial.
Really? Why is that?
Well, in a system where people govern themselves, public opinion matters a lot.
Of course, it shapes our politics.
It influences elections.
And ultimately, it decides where society goes.
But how do we know if public opinion is based on good reasons?
Right. On evidence, on a real concern for the common good.
Or if it's just driven by emotions or manipulation.
Exactly. That's what philosophers have been debating for centuries.
So it's not just about having opinions, it's about where those opinions come from.
Yes, and how they're formed.
This takes us back to ancient Greece,
The birthplace of democracy.
with thinkers like Plato and Aristotle.
Already arguing about the role of opinion.
Okay, let's start with Plato.
Okay.
He was the philosopher king guy, right?
He was.
What did he think about ordinary people's opinions?
Plato was pretty skeptical, actually.
How so?
He thought the masses were easily manipulated by emotions and fancy rhetoric.
Okay.
He didn't think they could make good judgments about complex political stuff.
So he basically thought most people weren't qualified to govern themselves.
Basically, yeah.
That's a pretty elitist view.
It is, and it's had a big impact on Western thought.
But other thinkers, like Aristotle, had a different take, right?
They did.
Didn't Aristotle think there was some wisdom in the collective judgment of the people?
He did. While recognizing that individuals can make mistakes, he also believed that a diverse group, deliberating together, could often come to more balanced and just decisions.
Like the wisdom of the crowd idea.
Exactly. He saw this as tapping into a shared wisdom that no one person could have on their own.
That makes sense. But what about those who try to manipulate public opinion?
Right, for their own benefit.
There's a lot of that going around these days.
Especially online.
Yeah, with social media and all the misinformation out there.
That's a crucial point.
And I bet Machiavelli would have something to say about that.
Oh, absolutely. Machiavelli was very aware of the dangers of manipulating public opinion.
I can imagine.
He knew that rulers could exploit people's fears and desires.
To get what they want.
Exactly. Wasn't he the one who said, it's better to be feared than loved?
He did.
And while that's often taken out of context, it does reflect Machiavelli's view that rulers sometimes need to use trickery, even force, to keep things in order.
Interesting.
He saw public opinion as a powerful tool.
That could be used for good or bad.
Exactly, depending on who's wielding it.
So for Machiavelli, opinion was more about strategy than truth.
Right. It was about power and manipulation.
Which we still see today.
All the time.
Yeah.
Politicians and media figures using all sorts of techniques
to shape how we see things
and push their own agendas.
It's a reminder to be critical thinkers.
Always.
Always question what you see and hear.
Exactly. Okay, now let's bring Rousseau back into this.
Okay.
He had that idea of the general will.
Right.
How does that connect to public opinion? For Rousseau, the general will wasn't something imposed on people. It came from their deliberations.
From discussions and debates.
Exactly. He believed that through open and honest dialogue, citizens could figure out what was best for everyone.
The common good.
The general will.
So he thought public opinion, formed through real dialogue, could actually reflect a higher truth.
That was his hope, that collective wisdom could emerge.
But that's hard to achieve, isn't it?
It is. Rousseau knew people could be swayed by emotions.
By prejudices.
By bad information.
So how do you make sure public opinion is based on reason and a genuine concern for the common good?
Rousseau thought education was key.
Okay.
Citizens needed to be taught how to think critically.
To separate truth from lies?
Exactly. He also believed in civic virtue.
What's that?
Putting the community's interests above your own.
Okay.
That was crucial for a healthy republic.
That's a tall order, especially today.
It is. It's tough when information is so fragmented.
Yeah, everyone's in their own echo chamber.
But Rousseau reminds us that a good democracy requires more than just voting.
It needs active participation.
Informed deliberation.
And a willingness to listen to different viewpoints.
Even the ones we disagree with.
It's a challenge, but maybe it's a challenge worth striving for.
I think so.
Now let's see how these ideas about public opinion played out in America.
Okay.
And that brings us to Alexis de Tocqueville.
Ah, Tocqueville.
A French thinker who came to America in the 19th century.
Okay.
He was fascinated by American democracy.
Both its good and bad sides.
Right. He was impressed, but he also warned about the tyranny of the majority.
Exactly. He saw how egalitarian America was.
No aristocracy.
Right. And citizens were very involved in politics.
But he also worried that the majority could suppress minorities.
That was a big concern for him.
So even in a democracy, the will of the people can be dangerous if it's not guided by principles of justice.
That was Tocqueville's point. He thought a good democracy needs majority rule, but also strong protections for individual rights.
To keep things in check.
Exactly. He also warned against conformity, what he called the despotism of public opinion.
Where people feel pressured to agree with the majority, even if they're wrong.
That sounds very relevant today.
It does. With social media and everything.
Tocqueville reminds us that a healthy democracy needs dissent.
People willing to challenge the status quo.
To speak up for what they believe in.
Even if it's unpopular.
Exactly.
So it's all about balance.
Finding that sweet spot between the power of public opinion and its potential for abuse.
And that's a balance we're still working on.
We are. Especially in this age of technology and constantly changing information.
Okay, so we've explored republicanism and dived into the world of opinion.
Two big themes.
What else can we learn from these sources before we wrap up?
Well, there's one more thread that runs through all of this.
Okay, what's that?
The relationship between economics and politics.
They're definitely connected.
From Hobbes to Marx, philosophers have seen how those two realms are intertwined.
Each shaping the other.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't really separate them, can you?
Not really. I mean, think about Hobbes again.
Okay.
His obsession with order and security, it wasn't just about controlling people.
Right.
It was also about making the economy stable.
Ah, I see.
He thought competition for resources was a huge cause of conflict,
Makes sense.
especially in that state of nature he talked about.
Yeah, and that's still relevant today, right?
Oh, totally. Look at the global competition for oil, for water.
So for Hobbes, a powerful ruler was like an economic referee, too,
Exactly. Making sure everyone got a slice of the pie.
to keep things peaceful.
Right. But Locke had a totally different view.
Of course, Locke the liberal.
With his focus on individual rights and limited government,
Yeah.
he saw economic freedom as a natural part of those rights.
Okay.
Individuals should be free to own property,
Right.
and the government should stay out of the economy as much as possible.
That's the classic invisible hand argument.
It is. Let the market work its magic.
And everyone benefits, supposedly.
That's the theory. But Rousseau wasn't so sure.
Rousseau, the champion of equality,
With his focus on the common good,
he was more skeptical of that free market approach.
way more. He saw private property as a cause of inequality
Okay.
and social division.
It creates a gap between the rich and the poor,
Exactly. He thought it leads to a few people hoarding all the wealth and power.
while everyone else struggles.
Right.
So for Rousseau, economic inequality was dangerous for society as a whole.
It undermines that sense of shared purpose he valued so much.
It erodes the foundation of a healthy republic.
Exactly. And that theme of inequality causing problems,
Yeah.
it's something we see throughout history, even today.
It's interesting how their views on economics tie back to their views on human nature.
Right.
Hobbes, with his focus on self-interest and competition, seems to have a more pessimistic view.
Yeah, compared to Locke, who's more optimistic about cooperation and reason.
And then there's Marx, who took this critique of capitalism even further.
Oh yeah, Marx went all in.
He saw the connection between economics and politics as the key to understanding history.
For him, it wasn't just complex, it was fundamental.
He saw all of history as a struggle between economic classes.
Each era defined by how things are produced.
And who controls those means of production.
Yeah, exactly. So for Marx, economics isn't just one part of society, it's the foundation.
It shapes everything else.
He argued that the way we produce and distribute goods,
Yeah.
that determines our politics, our laws, our culture, even our ideas.
And he saw capitalism as inherently exploitative,
The bourgeoisie, the owners.
taking advantage of the proletariat, the workers.
That's the heart of his critique,
Capitalism is built on injustice.
leading to alienation, inequality, and conflict.
And he thought it would eventually be overthrown.
Replaced with a more just
A
system
communist utopia.
where everyone shares the means of production.
But that hasn't happened, has it?
Not yet. But that doesn't mean Marx's ideas are worthless.
Right.
His analysis of economic power, his focus on inequality,
They're still relevant today.
especially as we face issues like globalization and the concentration of wealth.
It's like we're still living in the shadow of these debates.
Between Hobbes and Marx, between different visions of how society should work,
So where does all this leave us? What can we learn from these thinkers, even if we don't agree with all of their ideas?
I think the key takeaway is that the connection between economics and politics is messy
Complicated.
and always changing.
There's no easy answer.
No single ideology that solves everything.
But by understanding the history of these debates,
And the different ways people have thought about them,
we can be more informed citizens.
better able to face the challenges of our time.
It's like we've been given a toolkit
Different ways to look at the world.
to understand the forces that shape it.
Exactly. We've talked about human nature, government, power, civic virtue, manipulation, and the interplay of economics and politics,
Big topics.
all still relevant in the 21st century.
As we deal with things like globalization, inequality, and the future of democracy itself,
It's a lot to think about.
that's the point of a deep dive, right?
To challenge our thinking
To see things from different angles.
and maybe end up with more questions than answers.
I think we've definitely done that.
We've covered a lot of ground.
From Hobbes to Marx, from ancient Rome to modern America, from the nature of power to the role of public opinion.
It's been quite a journey.
And we've only scratched the surface.
There's always more to explore.
That's what makes it so fascinating.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Something to ponder as you continue your own exploration of these ideas.
We've talked about big theories, grand historical narratives.
But at the end of the day,
History is made by people,
individuals making choices,
taking action.
shaping the world.
So here's the question for you.
How will you use these insights?
How will you engage with the challenges of our time?
Will you be a passive observer?
Watching from the sidelines?
Or will you actively participate
Use your knowledge and your voice.
to make a difference?
That's it for our deep dive into political philosophy. We hope you've enjoyed the journey. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those philosophical wheels turning. Until next time.